The king's had enough. He has finally decided to distance himself from these ongoing claims.
Invictus Games are weeks away. Harry has been quietly signaling through back channels and carefully planted media whispers music that he is ready to come home, ready to re-engage, ready to rebuild something with the family he walked away from. And King Charles just sent back the clearest answer the palace has issued in years. Not in a speech, not in a formal statement, not through any announcement that would give Harry the dignity of a public confrontation, but through something far more devastating: music. The institutional silence of a monarchy that has simply moved on. Today, we are breaking down exactly what is happening, what it means for Harry's Invictus moment, and why the sources closest to this story are saying the same thing in very different words. This rejection is not a pause. It is a conclusion. Stay with me because this story has layers that the headline writers are completely missing. And by the end of this video, you will understand something about this family that most people are still refusing to see. The context. What Harry was expecting. To understand the scale of what has just happened, you need to understand music. What Harry actually believed was possible. For months, the reconciliation narrative has been cycling through the media with a kind of persistence that music only happens when someone is actively feeding it. Senior aide Theo Riefraftoft reportedly involved in quiet diplomatic efforts. Channels described as "open the door," we were told repeatedly, had not been fully shut. Harry believed this. Or more accurately, Harry needed to believe this because without the possibility of a thaw, his entire positioning, the return visits, the Invictus platform, the carefully managed optics of a man still connected to his roots falls apart. Here is what Paula Frolic, a journalist with genuine, long-standing sources inside this world, actually said. Harry puts his wishes out in the media and hopes they come true. Read that again because that is not a description of a negotiation. That is not a description of a bilateral diplomatic process. That is the description of a man publishing his hopes and calling them reporting. And the palace has been watching, patient, unhurried. Because that is what institutions that have outlasted empires do. They wait for the noise to pass and then they act. The question you need to ask yourself right now is, what does a rejection look like, music, when a 1,000-year-old institution decides to issue one? It does not look like a press conference. It looks exactly like what we are seeing, the Charles calculation. Let us be precise about King Charles here because he is being misread in almost every mainstream account. Yes, music. Charles wants to see his son. Multiple sources, including those speaking to the Royal News Network, have confirmed that the king holds out genuine hope for some kind of personal connection, music, with Harry. He is a father. That instinct does not simply switch off. But here is what the mainstream media narrative consistently fails to account for. Charles is also a king, and a king who is navigating a cancer diagnosis. Music. A working monarchy that is actively restructuring around William and Catherine, and an institution whose long-term credibility depends on the perception that it cannot be manipulated or leveraged. That king operates under a completely different set of constraints, music, than a father who simply misses his son. Sources speaking to Royal News Network have been explicit. Music. They understand Harry is fully untrustworthy and therefore they cannot be around him. That word untrustworthy is not emotional language. That is institutional language. That is the language of risk management. What it says is whatever Charles feels personally, the institution has reached a verdict. And in the British monarchy, the institution always wins. So when Charles distances himself from the reconciliation reports, when the palace declines to confirm any of the back-channel diplomatic work that Harry's side has been leaking to the press, when a Buckingham Palace source simply declines to comment on whether Harry will have his family with him in July, what you are watching is not a father being cold. You are watching an institution protecting itself from someone it has formally assessed as a liability. Does that make you uncomfortable? It should, because it means the gap between what Harry thinks is happening and what is actually happening, music, may be wider than anyone has publicly acknowledged. The William factor. Now let us talk about the other variable in this equation. The one that changes everything. Prince William. While Charles may still carry the emotional weight of fatherhood into this calculation, William carries something else entirely. William carries the specific, concrete, documented memory of what it cost him personally to have his brother in his life. Charlotte Griffith, a journalist who has spent years covering music this family with genuine sourcing, was asked directly, "Would you say William despises Harry?" Her answer was unambiguous. "The anger is so bad it's got to a point where people can't even mention Harry's name in front of William." And in fact, William claims he is not even angry with his brother because his brother is a non-person. Think about what that means. Not angry, a non-person. That is not the language of an unresolved family argument. Music. That is the language of someone who has made a permanent internal decision. William has not moved past Harry in the way a person moves past a disagreement. He, music, has moved past Harry in the way a person erases a chapter entirely. And William is not peripheral to the reconciliation calculus. He is central to it. Because any institutional rehabilitation of Harry, any formal re-engagement, any restoration of access, music titles, protection, presence at official events, requires William's buy-in. And William's buy-in, according to every credible source currently reporting on this family, is not available at any price. Music. So Harry is not navigating one rejection, he is navigating two. A father who wants to see him but cannot trust him. And a brother who no longer acknowledges his existence. Music. That is the foundation on which the Invictus reunion story is being built. Do you see the structural problem? The Meghan problem. Here is the sentence that explains everything and that almost nobody in the mainstream press wants to say, music, plainly. No one ever wants to see Meghan again. Those are not my words. That is a direct characterization from inside the palace orbit reported by multiple journalists whose sourcing across this story has been consistent and reliable. And it is reported not as a rumor, not as a one-off comment from a disgruntled staff member, but as a settled institutional position. Now, sit with what that means for Harry's Invictus approach. Because the reports on Harry's potential return to the UK in July are not describing a solo visit by a man trying to reconnect with his father and brother on whatever terms are available. They are describing a conditional engagement. One where Meghan's presence, Meghan's terms, and Meghan's conditions about who gets access and what the engagement looks like are reportedly part of the package. Which means Harry is not offering the palace a reconciliation. He is offering them a negotiation with someone that, according to these same sources, nobody in that family wants to see at all. The palace is not being asked to take a step toward Harry. The palace is being asked to accept Meghan back on terms that Meghan helps music set. And the palace's answer, communicated in the unhurried institutional way that says everything without ever needing to say a word, is no. Paul Frolish's source was direct. Yes. The king would like to see his son and his grandson. No one ever wants to see Meghan again, but they understand Harry is fully untrustworthy and so they can't be around him. So ask yourself, if you were Harry and you, music, understood this, genuinely understood it, what would your next move be? Because the move he appears to be making, the one being reported across multiple outlets, is to keep attaching conditions that make the thing the palace most dreads, Meghan's return to British institutional life, a prerequisite for the thing the king most wants, seeing his son and grandchildren. That is not a negotiating strategy. That is a standoff. And in a standoff between one man and a 1,000-year-old institution, the institution does not blink. The trust deficit, why spare changed everything. Let us go back to the root. Because the reconciliation conversation, every version of it, every back-channel initiative, every music, cautious media report about open doors and quiet diplomacy keeps circling the same problem without ever naming it, music, directly. The palace does not trust Harry, not conditionally, not with reservations, with a completeness that extends, according to sources speaking to multiple credible journalists, to the point where being in a room alone with him is considered untenable, where any private conversation requires a witness because the alternative is that it ends up in a book, a documentary, an interview, or a carefully timed leak to a friendly journalist. Imagine reaching that point with a family member. Imagine the relationship having so thoroughly broken music down that the concern is not whether they will behave badly but whether they will monetize the interaction. That is where this family is, music. And the reason they are there has a title. Spare. Bear. Cannot be unwritten. The people it described the grandmother who has since died. The grandfather who read it before he too was gone. The brother, the sister-in-law who was fighting cancer while its claims about her circulated globally. They read it. Their staff read it, the institution read it, and the institution has a very long memory. Here is the question nobody in Harry's camp seems to be asking. What does Harry offer the palace that music outweighs what spare cost them? What gesture, what visit, what carefully managed media moment makes the king say to his senior staff, "I know this man published intimate family details while my wife was ill and my father was dying, but let us bring him back into the fold"? There is no answer to that question. And the palace's behavior in recent months is not ambiguity. It is the answer. The children, the quietest part of the story. Now, let us talk about something that the headlines tend to skim past entirely in favor of the adult drama. Because this is the dimension of the story that cuts deepest. Archie and Lily. They are Harry's children. They are also by bloodline the grandchildren of a king. Their titles exist. Their place in the line of succession is technically intact. But the reality of what their connection to this institution actually looks like is becoming something very different from what their birth certificates suggest. William's children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, are being raised inside a working monarchy. They are visible. They are present. They are being prepared in the way that the institution has always prepared its heirs for the roles they will one day fill. Their faces appear at state occasions. Their presence at Trooping the Color is unremarkable because it is expected they belong. Harry's children are in California. Their faces are managed in curated social media content. Their access to the institution to which they are nominally connected is growing more theoretical with every passing month. No formal announcement has stripped them of anything. No declaration has been made. But the slow institutional logic of a family that has moved on does not require declarations. It requires only time, and time is doing exactly what time does. Harry reportedly understands this now in a way he perhaps did not fully absorb when the decisions were being made. Whether he understood it or not, the trajectory was set by choices, his choices, and Meghan's music choices about how those choices would be framed publicly. Their children will not have what William's children have. Not because anyone formally took it from them, because the doors that would have given them that access were closed from the inside. And closed doors do not reopen simply because the person who closed them has since changed their mind about wanting back in. That is not cruelty. That is the shape that choices make when enough of them accumulate in the same direction. Invictus, music, the legacy under pressure. The Invictus Games were supposed to be the thing that was above all of this. And in a genuinely important sense, they are. The veterans who participate are real. The physical and psychological rehabilitation they experience is documented and valuable. The mission of the Games, the commitment to military service and recovery, is not a brand exercise. It is real work that touches real lives. But the governance questions now surrounding the Invictus Games organization cannot be waved away. Leadership departures, financial pressures, corporate sponsorship that is reportedly harder to secure than it once was. And these questions are arriving at the exact moment when Harry needs Invictus to carry the full weight of his public identity because the Sussex brand elsewhere is under severe strain. Music. Sentable has had its difficulties. Africa Parks carries allegations that have generated serious scrutiny. Travist's profile has faded music. And now Invictus, the centerpiece, is facing questions that its founder does not appear to be equipped to answer. Paula Frolic put it directly. He doesn't understand that actual charity takes work. He doesn't understand that in order to get donations, you have to be associated with the royal family. He wants to show up and shake a hand. And people are looking at Invictus finances and asking questions that a handshake does not answer. This is the cruelest part of the timing because the Invictus Games are scheduled. The veterans are preparing, the events will happen, and Harry will show up and there will be coverage, and some of that music coverage will be warm. But the institutional scaffolding around those games, the sponsorship credibility, the governance reputation, the sustained serious support that turns a sporting event into an enduring legacy, that scaffolding is under pressure in a way that Harry seems unprepared to address. And the comparison that no one in his communications team wants made, but that makes itself every single time, is William. William's charitable portfolio is not generating governance concerns or leadership crisis. Not because William is lucky, because he shows up consistently without conditions, without a documentary crew, without the service itself being chapter material in an ongoing personal narrative about why he deserves more music credit than he receives. The institutional signal reading what isn't said. Here is how the British monarchy communicates music when it wants to communicate without communicating. It says nothing. When a Buckingham Palace source declines to comment on whether Harry will bring Meghan and the children to the UK in July, that is not a refusal to engage. That is a statement. When the Palace Music website continues to carry Harry and Meghan's names in certain places, not because anyone is making a deliberate decision to keep them there, but because no one is making a deliberate decision to remove them yet. That too is a statement. It says, "We have not formally concluded this, but we are not hurrying either." The mainstream media keeps interpreting this silence as ambiguity, as if the palace is still deciding, as if the right phone call or the right back-channel music conversation could shift the outcome. But ambiguity does not produce consistent sourcing across multiple credible journalists, all pointing in the same direction. Ambiguity does not produce the level of specificity we are now seeing in reports about what the family actually says about this couple behind closed doors. We're hearing that all of this behind closed doors at Monte Ito is causing Meghan to spiral. The royal family do not care anymore whether they see Harry ever again. The king is reaching the end of his tether. These are not the words of an institution still weighing its options. These are the words of an institution that has decided and is waiting for the right music moment, the unhurried, undramatic, institutionally appropriate music moment to make that decision structural. When the palace website is quietly updated, when Harry's details quietly disappear, when no invitation arrives for the events where William's family will be present, music, there will be no announcement, no press release, no formal acknowledgement of what it means, and it will mean everything. What Harry is actually feeling, let us be honest about the human dimension here, because this is not only an institutional story, it is a human one. Harry misses his father. Multiple sources, music, confirm this, and it is entirely plausible. He misses the access, the belonging, the rootedness of being part of something larger than yourself that existed before you and will exist, music, after you. When he watched footage of William at a football match, genuinely relaxed, genuinely present, genuinely part of a life with continuity and community. It is not a stretch to imagine what that footage cost him internally and his children. He is watching his children grow up in California, far from the institution that shaped the life he was born into. Whatever the public posture, whatever the carefully constructed messaging about freedom and authenticity and living on his own terms, there is something he gave up that cannot be reconstructed in Montecito, and he knows it. But here is where the sympathy runs out for a lot of people, and I want to be precise about why. Harry reportedly set conditions on his own potential attendance at UK events before he was even invited. One source described it this way. It is like saying, "I would love to come to your house, but only if you remove all the other guests, provide specific refreshments, and accept that I will be bringing someone you have specifically said you do not want to see. And by the way, you have not actually invited me yet." That is not the behavior of a man who has genuinely reckoned with what happened. That is the behavior of a man who wants the emotional outcome, the reunion, the warmth, the footage of reconciliation without engaging with the actual structural causes of the breakdown. The palace can see this. William can see this. And the quiet, patient institutional machinery of the crown is simply waiting. Not cruelly, not triumphantly, just waiting for Harry to understand warmth, the footage of reconciliation without engaging with the actual structural causes of the breakdown. The palace can see this. William can see this. And the quiet, patient institutional machinery of the crown is simply waiting. Not cruelly, not triumphantly, just waiting for Harry to understand what everyone else already has. The British public. Why none of this is playing in Harry's favor? The British public has a memory, and it is at least as long as the institutions. There are people in the United Kingdom who watched the Oprah interview while Prince Philip was in hospital, who watched the Netflix documentary series while members of the royal family were managing illness and succession and the sheer administrative weight of a monarchy in transition, who read or heard about what was written in Spare. And the question the British public is asking is not whether reconciliation is emotionally possible. It is whether it is deserved. Whether the public gestures of openness, the leaked back-channel stories, the reported willingness to attend events constitute genuine accountability or constitute a sophisticated media strategy designed to shift the moral burden onto the palace. The Royal News Network has been direct. Harry needs to realize that his services are no longer required and would be best served growing up and getting a real job. That is strong language. But music, reflects a sentiment that polling and commentary have consistently confirmed. The British public's tolerance for the Sussex narrative has not grown with time. It has contracted. And here is the strategic miscalculation at the heart of Harry's current position. His media strategy has always been built on an American audience, one that is broadly sympathetic to narratives about escaping institutional constraint and family dysfunction. But the event that matters here, the Invictus Games, is in Britain. The institution he wants to re-engage with is British. The family he misses is British. And the British public, which will set the atmosphere for every photo opportunity and media moment in July, is operating on a completely different emotional logic than the one Harry has been cultivating for the past 4 years. That gap does not close with a well, like a strategy and more like genuine humility. And the clock music, on whether Harry has enough of either remaining, is running. The palace's next move, what to watch for. So where does this go? The palace's next move will not be dramatic. That is the first thing to understand. It will be quiet, incremental, and will be understood by everyone who matters without any explanation being required. Watch the official communications. Watch whether Harry and Meghan's profiles on royal websites are quietly updated or removed. Watch whether any invitation, even an informal or indirect one, reaches Harry before July. Music. Watch whether the protection review for his family, currently under consideration by the Home Office, produces a result that functionally prevents Meghan and the children placed interview or a carefully managed arrival at an airport. It closes with time, accountability, and something that looks less Rom accompanying him to Britain. That last one is important because if protection is denied or significantly limited, the condition Harry has attached to his own presence, Meghan and the children coming with him, becomes structurally impossible to meet, and the palace will not have said a word. Watch William's public schedule during July. Watch whether there is any overlap with Harry's planned appearances, any moment that could be photographed as a reunion, and watch whether that overlap is conspicuously architecturally absent. Watch Charles. Watch whether he makes any public gesture toward Harry that could be interpreted as warmth or invitation. My prediction based on everything the sourcing in this story currently supports is that Charles will do nothing that could be read as an opening. Not because he does music, not love his son, but because he is a king first and the institution has rendered its verdict, and watch Invictus. Watch the sponsorship announcements or the absence of them. Watch whether the governance questions that are now circulating in serious outlets generate any sustained coverage. Watch whether the games themselves produce the legacy moment Harry needs, or whether they become another chapter in a story about potential that was never quite fully realized. The bigger picture. Music. What this tells us about the monarchy. Step back from the personalities for a moment and look at what this story actually reveals about how the British monarchy functions. The institution has survived because it evolves slowly and defends itself quietly. It does not engage in public battles with its critics. It does not answer challenges with counter-challenges. It waits, adjusts, and moves on. And in moving on, it makes the people it has moved past irrelevant without ever needing to declare them. So, Harry made a fundamental miscalculation about the nature of the institution he was born into. He assumed, or at least behaved as though he assumed, that the monarchy needed him, that his popularity, his appeal to younger and more diverse audiences, his marriage to a woman who represented something new and modern, made him indispensable in a way that traditional royals were not. The monarchy, it turns out, did not agree. The monarchy has William and Catherine, whose public approval has grown in recent years. It has Princess Anne, whose tireless work ethic and genuine public affection provide a model of royal service that needs no rebranding. It has the Edinburghs and the Zara Tindalls, and the quiet machinery of an institution that keeps working regardless of who is inside it. Harry's departure created a gap. The institution filled the gap, and the institution is now operating as though Harry was always going to leave eventually, because looking at the evidence, perhaps he was. What Harry does not seem to have fully accepted yet is that leaving was permanent. That you cannot blow up a bridge and then stand on the rubble and negotiate for permission to cross. The irony of Invictus. Here is the deepest irony in this entire story. The Invictus Games were created by Harry as an expression of exactly the quality the palace now says he most lacks. Selfless service. The games are built on the principle that the work matters more than the person doing it. That the veterans in those arenas, the people overcoming injury and trauma and loss are the story, not their patron. But Harry's public journey since leaving the royal family has been the inverse of everything Invictus is supposed to stand for. It has been music. Intensely personal, intensely narrative, intensely about him and about Meghan and about their story and their grievances and their truth. The veterans who give everything to those games deserve a patron whose own life story does not overshadow the mission of the institution. And right now in the week's music, before Invictus, the story is not about the games. It is about whether Harry can get a meeting with his father, whether Meghan will be allowed police protection, whether William will be photographed anywhere near his brother, and whether the finances of the Invictus organization can withstand the scrutiny they are now receiving. That is not the story the veterans deserve. And somewhere perhaps Harry knows that too. The chapter that is closing. Here is where we land. Harry wanted freedom. He got it. Meghan wanted Hollywood. She is navigating it. The children are growing up in California. The Sussex brand is in its most difficult period. The institutions that might have sustained Harry's public identity, Sentable, Africa Parks, Invictus itself are each carrying their own accumulating weight of scrutiny. And in Windsor, in Kensington, in the places where the working family gathers without fanfare and simply gets on with music, the world is moving, not against Harry, not in triumphant opposition, just forward, the way it always does, the way it was always going to. King Charles has not issued a public rejection of his son. He has done something more conclusive. He has allowed the institution to simply proceed without Harry, without drama, without the reconciliation story that Harry's side has been carefully cultivating in the press. And William has moved past it in the way that only complete emotional finality makes possible. His brother is not a wound anymore. His brother is a closed chapter. The palace website still carries their names in places. That will change. The protection review is ongoing. That will resolve one way or another. The Invictus Games will happen. They will generate some coverage. And Harry will return to California, and the slow realization that the phone call he has been waiting for is not coming. Not because the king does not love his son, but because love and institutional trust are not the same thing, and the institution's verdict is final. Some doors once closed from the inside cannot be opened from the outside. That is not cruelty. That is just the shape that choices make when enough of them accumulate in the same direction.